Hi, everyone. I'm so excited for today's episode with John Quiñones. Like many of our guests, John is an excellent storyteller and uses his storytelling as a way to further social change. We will continue to discuss some of the themes from past episodes and really center in on the idea of always doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. Welcome to Small Steps, Big Change, the podcast where we meet extraordinary people who have used small steps to help create big change. I'm your host, Drew Sullivan. In August of 2020, after years of alcohol and cocaine use, I hit rock bottom. I knew at this moment that I had no choice but to get sober. Through lots of hard work and dedication, I made that a reality. I have to admit, I thought that this would fix everything and that a life filled with happiness would just follow. But sobriety was only the first step for me. I had to be sober before I was ever going to rebuild my life and recover all that was lost. I kept going, focusing on the next right move, or as I call it, the next small step. I then took the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. Every day is a journey for me, and I now believe that I'm in the middle of the most beautiful recovery story of all time. What I have learned is that my story has a lot in common with anyone looking to make big changes in their life. That's why it is time that we work together to make big things happen. Each week on this podcast, I will introduce you to a friend who has used small steps to help create their big change. We are all going through something, and it is my goal that by sharing our stories and bringing vulnerability and empathy to the forefront, we can learn from each other and take the small steps that are needed to create big change. A lifetime of never taking no for an answer took John Quiñones from migrant farm work and poverty to more than 30 years at ABC News, the anchor desk at 2020 and Primetime, and 7 national Emmy Awards for his reporting over the years. Along the way, he broke through barriers, won the highest accolades, and became a role model for many. As host and creator of What Would You Do?, the highly rated hidden camera ethical dilemma news magazine, now on its 14th season, Quiñones has literally become the face of doing the right thing to millions of fans. Known for truly connecting with audiences and leaving them uplifted and inspired, Quiñones delivers a powerful message of believing in oneself, never giving up, and always, always doing the right thing. It is my honor to introduce to Small Steps, John Quiñones. Hey, John, how's it going?
Good. I'm in Los Angeles where I just interviewed Diego Luna, the actor in the Star Wars new Disney Plus series that's premiering September 21st called Star Wars Andor. He's from Mexico and he's just a tremendous actor. And we're doing a special on Hispanic Heritage Month and he's part of it. So I'm a fan of this actor. And I'm here and then I'm going to give a speech tomorrow in Phoenix with the American Program Bureau. You may know that group.
A little bit.
And then going to Austin for a 2020 shoot on Thursday. So my schedule, as always, is really packed.
Always packed. Well, I definitely have found there's not many stories that stick with me so much. And I don't know if it's your voice. I don't know if it's the way you tell it, or maybe it's because I've just heard it a number of times with the work we do together. But I've always found your story and your journey super inspirational, just from your childhood and your family and your background all the way through your many years at ABC and as a journalist. I don't think there's any other better way to really start the discussion. Can you share that story a little bit and just how this whole story and journey and just the John Quiñones kind of narrative began?
Yeah, it's been pretty remarkable. And it doesn't seem like that sometimes now that I've been a correspondent for ABC News all these years, but certainly looking back as to where I came from, I was born in poverty in San Antonio, Texas, Mexican-American. My parents have been in Texas for like 7 generations, a long time. People forget that Texas was once part of Spain and Mexico, and so was California, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, right? Who's counting? But though that was all part of Spain and Mexico. And the Quiñones family has been there that long. My mother's side is from Mexico, from Monterrey. My grandmother was. But the point is, they never went to school because in San Antonio, it's such a Hispanic community. You don't have to learn English. We lived in the barrio where everyone spoke Spanish. The church we went to was in Spanish. The corner store, La Chicanita, where we bought our groceries, was in Spanish. The music that we danced to and listened to was in Spanish. And my father had to drop out of the third grade to pick cotton because he had a single mom and he had to help her. And so did my mom. So my dad was a gardener and then a janitor. And then my mother cleaned houses on the rich part of town. And I didn't speak English until I went to the first grade because I didn't learn. We couldn't afford preschool or kindergarten. It came easily to me learning English. I don't know what it was, maybe because it was being forced to speak only English in school. Whatever it was, I took to it pretty quickly. Unfortunately, a lot of my fellow students who were Mexican-American didn't, and they fell through the cracks, and many of them wound up in the same cycle of poverty. But somehow I survived. And I remember the first day of school, I went to class, and 10 o'clock in the morning, right? The school bell rings and it's recess time. So all the kids are going out to play in the playground. I had no idea. I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs. The teacher didn't speak Spanish. I didn't speak English. This is before bilingual education. When the bell rings at 10 in the morning, I went home. I walked home. I lived a block away. And my mother, Maria, looked at me and said, Juanito, ¿qué pasó? What happened? And I told her, it's over, Mom. I like school. 2 hours and you're done. But that's how tough it was. I mean, I couldn't even speak English, but I had a dream. I always would listen to this little transistor radio and hear these fabulous broadcasters report from all over the world. And I just wanted to be like that. I wanted to travel, and the dream came true. But it took a lot of struggling and working against the tide, because I was told we were migrant farm workers. When my dad was laid off, we picked cherries in Michigan and harvested tomatoes in Ohio. And people thought that I wasn't college material. When I came back to school, I would ask my teachers, how do I prepare for the SATs or the ACTs? Or how do I take advanced placement classes in math, biology, and English? Because I want to go to college someday. My own teachers and my own counselors would look at me and say, it's great, John, that you have this dream of someday being a TV reporter, but we think you should try wood shop or metal shop. Or auto mechanics. There's nothing wrong with those trades. A lot of people make a good, hard living, but I wanted to go to college. And my own counselors in my inner city school and my own teachers did what people do on that show, What Would You Do? They judged me by the color of my skin, the accent in my voice, because I had a heavy Mexican accent, and the fact that no one in my family had ever been to college. So what gave me the audacity was their feeling. What gave me the audacity to think that I was college material. But thank God for my mother. I always tell this story. My mother, Maria, who against all odds kept motivating me and pushing me and inspiring me. She would say, Mijo, which is my son, Mijo, don't be embarrassed about having to wear the same clothes to school every other day. At least they're clean. We wash them. And she would say, don't be embarrassed about having to take bean and refried tortillas and refried beans, tacos to lunch, when all the other kids are taking their fancy bologna and white bread. That doesn't matter, she would say. What matters is what's in here in your brain, and what's in here, pointing to her chest, your corazón, your heart. She was the one that kept me going. But it wasn't easy, man. I struggled. I joined a drama class because I wanted to get rid of my accent. And it's funny now, looking back, if you had any kind of Mexican accent, you couldn't get a job in television. I was interviewing that actor, Diego Luna, yesterday, who said it's such a joy to be able to use his accent in Star Wars. Now, he's in a movie and he can't change it because he is who he is. But not too long ago, he couldn't have an accent in films, or unless it was a film about that, or in television news, certainly not in television news. So I got involved in drama class, and at high school, I tried out for the role of Romeo and Juliet because I wanted to be able to first come out of my shell. I was very shy, and also work on my delivery, be able to enunciate. And my drama teacher was the one who slowed down my speech because I used to talk really fast. And then she said, enunciate, use your diaphragm, have your voice reach the back of the auditorium. And she helped tremendously. And then along came a government program. So along the way, Drew, there were these little helping hands, right? First, my inspiration from my mother and my father, who worked hard, but she was the one who kept pushing. My father, when we were bent over in those tomato fields outside Toledo, Ohio, looking at a row of tomato plants at 6 in the morning, cold, hard, wet ground, looking at a row of tomato plants that for a young 13-year-old boy's eyes seemed to go on for miles and miles. My father was right by me, and he was the one who said, Mijo, my son, do you want to do this kind of work for the rest of your life? Or do you want to get a college education someday? It was a no-brainer. I knew that I didn't want to do that kind of back-breaking work for the rest of my life. But as I said, very few people believed in me. But he inspired me. He kept saying, you can do it. And my mother. And then along came a government program called Upward Bound. And it was part of the TRIO program, the War on Poverty, back in the 70s, that President Johnson and President Kennedy had. The program's still around, by the way. What the government, their theory was that the only way out of poverty was through education. What a thought.
Yeah.
And they took 10 students from every inner city school across America. They interviewed 120 kids at my school. I don't know what they saw in me because my grades weren't that great. But I was one of the 10 students selected. And thanks to Upward Bound, what they did is they gave me extra courses on Saturdays in math, biology, and English. And then they let us live on a college campus for 6 weeks while we were in high school. So the 10th grade, 11th grade, the summers of those years, and the 12th grade, I got to live on a college campus. And for a kid who had no role models who had ever gone to college, I would be the first generation, the first in my entire family to go to college. This was a big deal. So thanks to the government program Upward Bound, and then my English teacher, we all have that one teacher. Her name was Teresa Gutierrez, and she taught me 10th grade English. And when everyone else had said I wasn't college material, she was the one who said, Johnny, I love the way you tell stories. I love the way you write your essays for English literature class. Have you thought about journalism? And I said, of course. I've been listening to the radio all these years. She said, I think you should meet the man who runs the school newspaper, Mr. Harris. So she introduces me to the teacher at Brackenridge High School in San Antonio who taught journalism and put out a weekly newspaper, the Brackenridge Times. And he hired me as a reporter. And then a few months later, I was named the chief of editorials of the Brackenridge Times. So there I was writing these big investigative stories, like why are the teachers parking in the students' parking spaces? Tonight we go undercover, find out. And that was my first entree into the world of journalism. So I've been doing this since I was 13 years old. A lot of helping hands along the way. I went to college in San Antonio, couldn't get hired in television. No one would hire me in television in Texas back in the 80s because back 70s. Everyone had their one Hispanic reporter. And it was like, we've met our quota. We don't need any more. We got one. And it was heartbreaking and depressing. Yeah. And also, I didn't have any television experience. I was a radio reporter because I started in radio as an intern at a country music station in San Antonio. Wow. I didn't have any TV experience, even though I did have my college degree. But it's funny how life is. And you know this, Drew, too. It's funny the people you meet along the way. I was at an audition in Houston, auditioning for a TV job that I didn't get. And I met a woman there and I told her my story. I said, man, I'm going to give up journalism. I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to try to get a loan and maybe go to law school at the University of Houston here in Texas. You know, making very little money. I was making $800 a month as a radio reporter, and half of that went to my rent. And she said, you know, John, don't give up journalism. You have such a passion for telling stories. If you're going to go back to school, go back to graduate school. She said, I went to Columbia University, the Graduate School of Journalism, the best journalism school in the world. And you can get a master's in journalism there in 1 year. And if you want to go, I'll write a letter for you recommending it. And as an alumni, they put a lot of credence in that. And she did. And I got accepted to Columbia in New York from Texas. The only time I'd been out of Texas was to go pick tomatoes in Ohio and cherries in Michigan. But it was great. I got accepted. And then I said, how am I going to pay for it? The tuition is prohibitively expensive. And I got on a plane, a cheap flight. I remember on Eastern Airlines to New York. And knocked on every financial aid door, telling them, look, I got accepted to your fine school. I really want to come here, but I can't afford it. Can I have a loan, a grant, scholarships, fellowships? You got to ask, man. You just got to keep knocking on doors and asking. And I did. They offered me a fellowship from NBC News to study, and it was a full ride. It paid for everything in Columbus.
Wow.
Packed up my U-Haul trailer, Houston, Texas, and I moved to New York City and I got a master's there. And then my career began in television, but it took that master's degree. You know, sometimes some of us have to be twice as qualified to get the job that others are getting. I hate to say it, but I think because there are so few Latinos, and I was one of the first network television, we almost have to be twice as qualified. I needed my master's degree from this Ivy League school to get considered for a job at CBS News.
Isn't unconditional love incredible? I know you're a parent, but I've lately been thinking about the unconditional love that we receive from parents. And of course, in your perspective, you provide as well. It's pretty crazy to me to think about how in our life, if we are blessed to have parents that are with us for a long time, we get the chance to see unconditional love from a lens that is really unparalleled. And I didn't really understand it for a long time, especially with the journey I've been on and the ups and downs and so many moments that I know have left a lot of pain and suffering for my parents. Really difficult for me to always understand how unconditional love was practiced throughout the entire time, because I just would have given up based on what I thought of myself and based on just what I was putting my parents through. And it wasn't until recently when I really dove into the side of recovery where I felt like I started to think so much deeper than just sobriety and not using substance, is when I really realized how much I loved myself, because I was so appreciative and filled with so much gratitude for the way I was able to change the trajectory of my life and treat myself healthier and with more respect. So I think for the first time, I saw what that unconditional love was. And I told my mom, and I think she had a little smile on her face because it made a lot of sense to her. But I finally felt that self-love. And it was the first time that I ever actually felt that unconditional love. And it really gave some meaning to me to really understand a little bit more around that unconditional love we receive from parents. I want to step outside of that parent and family world. And we have two Gen Z guests coming up over the next couple episodes. And I know that for them and for the way in which we've brought up young people and young ideas on this podcast, it really is the young people that are going to help us get out of a number of the problems that we're seeing today.
I hope they do the work and realize that it's going to take tremendous effort and that they want it badly enough. That's how I did it. And if you don't, then you're going to come up with excuses, and there's no shortage of them, or why not to do it. I was lucky enough to find a profession that I truly loved. I would do this job if I wasn't even getting paid for it, because I love telling stories. You do your work because there's a fire in your belly to do that kind of work. So that's my hope, and that's my advice whenever I speak to young folks, and especially people of color, because it's so easy to just blame someone else and throw up your hands and quit and say, there is no hope. I think there is much more hope now. And certainly in television news, you look around and there's so many great reporters out there who happen to be gay or Black or Hispanic or from the LGBTQ community, Asian, much more than was the case when I got started. I think the landscape is much better now, even in Hollywood. I was talking again to this actor yesterday, this Mexican actor. I had interviewed Salma Hayek 23 years ago, who told me when she tried out for a role as a scientist or an astronaut in a movie, she was told, what's wrong with you? Who's going to believe that a Mexican could be an astronaut?
Wow.
By the casting directors in Hollywood.
Holy moly.
Today, here's Diego Luna, who is the star of his own Disney Plus series that's going to run for 2 seasons, 12 episodes each season. And he is the star, and he speaks with a Mexican accent. He's from Mexico. He lives in Mexico. So things are better now. He pointed that out. Even in Hollywood, we're not perfect yet, but certainly getting there. So there's really, you just got to want it badly enough. And once you do, just push and forward and don't let anything hold you back. If anyone had enough excuses, it was me, because we didn't have money. I didn't have access. I didn't have role models. I used to watch Geraldo Rivera. He was the only one on 2020, but I didn't know him. When I would ask disc jockeys at my local stations in San Antonio for advice, so many of them didn't give me the time of day. That's why today, whenever I make public appearances, I make it a point to talk to every single person in line because I remember what it was like not to be paid attention to and to be ignored. Maybe it was my mom who instilled that in me, but I never stopped believing that I was good enough, even when times looked really bleak.
Fantastic. Yeah, it seems that there was a moment in your life where you realized that and I feel that this was really early on, or at least in the middle of your career, where it was unheard of when things are going so well. And when you are traveling the globe and reporting for ABC on the news side of things, to take such a vulnerable kind of risk and to jump so quickly into a new program around a new concept, around something that many could view as controversial. What I'm talking about there, obviously, is what would you do? And I have to ask, and I feel like I've never asked you this, and I don't think I've ever heard you answer this. What was going on inside John when this started? Because it seems that there must have been a number of situations where you were put in positions where you probably felt othered and where you felt as if even your colleagues and other people within the media landscape were treating you differently, or were saying things or doing things that were leaving you uncomfortable when you would go home at night. And you felt it probably wasn't the comfort level that we have today, where you can speak out openly about the things, and especially from a negative lens around bad behavior. How do you address that? Before we chat a little bit about what would you do, was this in a way, a personal project too, of saying, how do I help my own experience in the workplace, my experience in television, or my experience in my career? And in turn, if I can address what I'm feeling and find solutions to what's going on inside of me, this will then impact others that are also going through unconscious bias and silent racism and just so many areas of the DEI conversation that we're still dealing with today.
Yeah, definitely. I drew upon my own experiences as a Hispanic in this country. I remembered, you'll never forget these things, that when we were picking tomatoes in Ohio, and on Sundays, we'd have the day off and go shopping at the Goodwill store for clothes, or go for a hamburger at a burger joint. People would follow us around thinking that because we were speaking Spanish and we weren't dressed very well, that thinking that we were going to steal something, right? Making faces when we walked into the door. And even my teachers, when they said, what gives you the thought that you are college material? You're just Mexican. Your father's a janitor. Your mom is a cleaning lady. Even when I joined radio broadcasting, I was told, you are beginning to crawl, but you're not television material. You have a decent voice, but you're going to have to spend many years in local radio or working on this. I took that to heart and I tried to get that experience. But then I began to realize there was a pattern here where we were being excluded. I mean, the only reason I got a job in broadcasting in San Antonio was because there was this radical group of Mexican-American protesters who called themselves, it was during the Black Power movement and during the Civil Rights movement in the 60s and 70s. And in San Antonio, there were very few people who were Hispanic who were on the radio, English language, right? Or television, English language, even though the city's 60% Hispanic. So this group of radical Chicano guys put on some brown berets, and they call themselves the Brown Berets, and they started protesting at radio and TV stations, demanding that those stations hire a force that was representative, a staff that was representative of the population. Their argument was that the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, which governs radio and television stations, had a mandate that said that the airwaves belong to the people of America. They don't belong to Disney or Comcast or General Electric. They belong to the people. They're free, the airwaves, right? So therefore, every radio and TV station should hire a staff that represents their community. And these stations were not doing that. And they said, if you don't, we're going to petition the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, not to give you a license to broadcast. And of course, then radio and TV stations freaked out. This is their license to make money or print money. So they started hiring people to bolster their employment roles to say, yeah, we have some Hispanics. Look, we do. And I was one of the first people hired at the age of 18 at that radio country music station in San Antonio. So at every step of the way, I saw where Latinos were being held back. Even when I started, finally, I got my degree, my master's in journalism from Columbia, worked in Chicago television. Whenever I'd go do a story, I was always asked, so you are the cameraman? You are the sound man? Nobody presumed that I was the reporter, that I was the on-air guy. No, I'm going to be asking you the questions. So it irritated me. And that stuff never leaves you. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was hired in network television to go cover Latin America. It was during the time where Central America was burning up, and it was a good story. But I'm afraid that had there not been a need for a Spanish-speaking reporter at the network, I might not have been hired.
Wow.
I don't want to be seen as the Hispanic reporter. I want to be the reporter who's a good reporter, but happens to be Hispanic. So because of all that, I felt that there was an opportunity to do a hidden camera show where we would try to hold up a mirror to society.
Yeah.
And where we could come up with the strength, the power, and the light to showcase what it's like to be a person of color or a person who's been marginalized, and then come up with the power and the light to be able to change things. Who would step up and do the right thing? And I read an article in the New York Times, the Sunday Times magazine, called The Ethicist. And in that article, that columnist talked about how he had a newborn, or he had a child, and would go to the park with his baby. And at the park, he would see a lot of nannies, a lot of babysitters who were not taking care of the kids that they're supposed to be taking care of. They would be on their computer, on their cell phones. They'd be FaceTiming or listening to music. Meanwhile, the kid is in danger, could be kidnapped. His point was, how do you tell the parents of a child that their babysitter is doing a terrible job? And I read that article and I said, you know what? We could do a TV story on this and replicate that with actors. We can have a kid being taken care of and a nanny who's ignoring him. And we'll put hidden cameras in the bushes and the trash cans at a park in New Jersey. And we'll see how other people react when they see this. And that was the very first, what would you do? It was part of 2020. It's an age-old root technique of using hidden cameras to tell stories. It worked. ABC loved that segment on 2020. And then they said, can you do a whole hour of this? And I said, yeah, I think we can do 5 segments. We can come up with 5 ideas. And then they said, can you do 3 hours? Can you do 6 hours? Can you do 9 hours? Initially, we thought we would run out of ideas. You do. Well, here we are. We've gone 14 years and we've done 1,000 scenarios.
Wow.
Today, people are still clamoring for the show to return back on the air. We're not on the air because of COVID, but we're pushing ABC and Disney to get us back on either Hulu or Disney Plus. We'll see. But that's how it all started. And yes, I drew a lot from my own experiences as a Latino in America today.
I've definitely started to understand personal perspective a lot more now that I've been public with my addiction and now that I'm in recovery. I feel that my stories around my own journey are really rich and are able to give people a little bit of inspiration and motivation. And so I've shared them publicly, and I've had people that have said that they've really been able to see themselves in my story, and also that by sharing my story, I've been able to give them some hope. So I definitely can see, even in my small world to this point, the power of personal perspective. I think in What Would You Do, that there's also this big idea around the power of one person and how that power can transform and build so much. And I think it's that idea of what do you do when no one's watching, but also what is that one person doing when no one's watching? And how can that one person doing the right thing change a whole community and really push people in the same direction? And so I think that there's definitely also a connection with the mind of an addict and going through sobriety. And that's that idea that you are that one person that has to make a decision even when no one's watching. And the power that decision can then have is transformative and can really change your life and others. My question for you is, after all the episodes that you have done of the show and the amount of stories that you've been a part of, are there any that have really stuck with you? And are there any that you will never forget?
Yeah. First of all, we had a great staff of mainly young people in their 20s who are newcomers to television, but energetic and creative, and came up with all kinds of scenarios that we should be doing because many of them were so close to it. And so that helped a lot. We would brainstorm, and we will again, ideas, and then we would see which ones ABC might allow us to do, because also we have a standards and ethics department who have to approve of the scenarios that we do and make sure that they're not too dangerous where someone might get hurt because of a particular reaction from the audience. So we had to weigh all those things, but we wound up doing some really powerful ones. And a lot of them were based, again, on my own experiences. What I loved doing about this show was that it shined a light, right? People will deny that these things happen in real life. So we put a hidden camera on it and we show you how they do and the way people react when they have no idea that they're on hidden camera. That's my greatest joy, that to turn someone's opinion around after they deny. They'll say things like, you're playing the race card. Black folks aren't followed around a store when they're shopping. And yet they do. I was at an airport not long ago, getting on a flight to New York, and I was flying in first class, but I was dressed down. I was wearing a sweatshirt and baseball cap and jeans. And I was in the first class line at an airport. And then I noticed that everyone right before at the gate, all the other first class passengers by mistake had lined up in the economy line, which happens, but I was in the right place. And when I'm standing there, the lady at the front of that first class line, who was in the wrong line, said to me, sir, are you even in first class? I just nodded. She goes, and I pointed to the sign above my head. And she said, the first class passengers are over here. So get to the back of this line. And I didn't want to cause an argument, so I didn't care, man. I'm a former migrant worker. To be flying on an airplane, it's still a big deal for me. So I went to the back of the line slowly, maybe 10 people back. And on my way to the back of the line, she yelled out, the announcement was made in English. We speak English in America. Assuming that because of the way I looked, I didn't speak English. And then other people in line who finally recognized me from the show said, John, is this a what would you do scenario? And I said,
Oh my God.
no, unfortunately, no. It's real life. And as I'm standing in the back of the line, my only fear was that I was going to have to sit next to this mean person on the plane. So I got on the plane and she was by herself in first class. I went to my seat, but as I passed by her, I couldn't resist. I leaned over to her and I said, ma'am, my name is John Quiñones, and I do a TV show called What Would You Do? And you would be perfect for the show.
Oh my gosh.
You could play the part of the racist. She gave me another dirty look.
Wow.
But that's why we do this show. And there's some of the scenarios that have stood up. My favorite is the homeless person you're walking down the street and this person collapses in front of you on the sidewalk. And you don't know if she had a heart attack or whether they fainted or what. And you don't know medicine. But what do you do? What would you do if you're walking down the sidewalk, the person in front of you collapses? And we did it like at 7, 8, 9 in the morning, right by the train station in Newark, New Jersey, where not only now do you not know anything about medicine, whether to help someone, but you're also in a hurry, right? You got to get on that train to get to work.
Yeah.
So that added element that we threw in. And at first we did it with a well-dressed businesswoman who's walking along, a stunt artist who falls very convincingly. A woman in her 40s, she's well-dressed, white woman, and she collapses. And when that happened, time and again, people stopped to help her. It was cold, they put coats over her, they called 911, the right thing to do. But then I thought, that's impressive, but what if instead of a well-dressed businesswoman, it's a homeless person who's elderly, an old man, right? Elderly, dirty, smelly, disheveled, bearded, 80 years old, and he's carrying a beer can. See, what will people do then? So we got an actor, an elderly actor to play that role, stunt artist who falls convincingly. So he did it. 88 people went by, Drew, and not one person would stop to help him. People are stepping over him. One lady made the sign of the cross and kept walking. And we were blown away. And I said, well, I guess if you're a homeless person, you're not going to get a lot of help here. So we're about ready to come out where I tell everybody, it's the show. He's an actor. But before I could get out there, we heard the tapping of a walking cane on the sidewalk. And then into the frame of the hidden camera comes this woman who is stumbling along with a walking cane because she has suffered a stroke. She's a Black woman. And guess what? She's homeless herself. And guess what? She stops to help. So she starts asking people going by, excuse me, does anyone have a cell phone to call 911 for this man? He's white, she's Black. Not that that should matter. 38 more people go by and no one is listening to her. She then stumbles down to him and did something we didn't expect. She takes the beer can out of his hand and she moseys over to the trash can and throws it there and stumbles along with her walking cane as if to think maybe if people don't think he's an alcoholic, maybe they'll stop to help.
Yeah.
No luck. 48 more people go by. We're counting them. She was so upset. I remember the hidden camera was tight on her face. She made a fist to the heavens and she was almost cursing God himself, saying, how can you allow this to happen? She was angry. And then she stumbled down again to him, the man on the ground. We could hear it because the actor on the ground was wearing a wireless microphone. And she said to him, sir, I don't know your name, but I'm going to call you Billy. She said, Billy, my name is Linda Hamilton. And don't you worry, my man, I'm going to stay here till help arrives. And then a woman stopped and called 911. Thank God. And we finally come out with the cameras. But in all the excitement, when I come out asking people to sign releases to be on the show and all that, in all the chaos of all that, people are relieved, people are crying, people are happy that it was just a TV scenario. We lost our hero. She slipped away. Linda Hill,
Wow.
homeless woman who stopped to help, got away from us. Well, we put her on the air a few weeks later on What Would You Do? Because we knew her name and we mentioned that she was homeless. She said she was homeless. And we put it on the air. The day after it aired on What Would You Do on ABC, we got hundreds of phone calls, emails, and on social media, people asking, who was that woman? We want to help her. Our viewers, they started a GoFundMe page on Facebook with a picture of her from the TV screen. And it was titled, Touched by an Angel, touched by Linda Hamilton. And they started raising money, our viewers. So they raised $9,000. And my producer called me and said, John, we got to find her. We got to give her this money. How do you find a homeless person? We spent 2 weeks with our staff out in Newark, New Jersey, with plastered pictures of her all over the place at liquor stores, train stations, homeless shelters. And a week later, we found her. So then my producer said, John, you got to come out and we'll interview her about what she did and tell her about, and give her the money that people have raised. So we found her. We met Linda Hamilton on some church steps and we got $9,000 for her in the bank. We got her a place to live in. We got her medicine that she was supposed to be taking for her heart condition. And the thing that made her most excited of all, we got her own cell phone. So she was jumping up and down with joy like a 12-year-old. And I said, now, next time that happens, Linda, you can call 911 because you have your own phone now.
Wow, that's great.
But at the end, I said to her, Linda, people are calling you a hero. People are calling you an angel. They did this GoFundMe page. Are you? Do you consider yourself a hero? She looked at me dead on. She goes, no way, John Quiñones, no way. Let me tell you what I think happened. She said, I think God put me on that corner, on that street, on that day, because he knew you were there with your What Would You Do cameras. And he wanted to teach people a lesson. And
Wow.
better to teach that lesson than someone who has walked in the shoes of the homeless. So that's my favorite one.
Wow, that's powerful. And talk about representation and just how the power of representation matters. And when we are not othered based on the cards we've been dealt, our race, our gender, sexual orientation, you name it, what can happen? And that people can get through tough times, they can get through problems, they can overcome the situations that they're in. But really, whenever that is going to be possible is when othering doesn't happen. And when we are not looking at people, I've said this few times to some young people in my life and people that I see that choose Halloween as a chance to dress up as an addict or a bum, as they like to say. And I feel privileged that over the past couple of years in this part of my journey that I've had a couple moments where I've been able to let people know that are planning to do that. Well, wait, you're in the wrong costume. And then they always get a little taken aback. I'm like, do you want some clothes? You want one of my outfits? And they don't get it. And I said, well, listen, your idea of what is an addict or what is a bum, that definition and that narrative that society has told us over the years, and I think has been corrected, but also what you think based on what you on social media and different things is wrong. They said there's many people that are going through those same stereotypical problems that you think a homeless person's going through, or someone that is disrupting society on the street. That's what I go through when I sit at my desk every day. It's that same idea of don't judge a book by its cover, but also don't assume that the only book cover is the one it looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
There's different stories that have different covers. And so I want to chat a little quickly about some self-care stuff. I think that it must be something that you've done pretty well throughout the years, being in the position you're in. And one of the things I've noticed, and it seems to be a common trend with you, and something that I actually think our mutual friend, Juju Chang, I think it's a similar thing with her. And maybe it's journalists in general. I don't think so, because I've worked with some that don't have this same reality, but it seems that people love to say, John's just John, or that's just John Quiñones, or it's the same John I've known for 30 years. It's a rare reputation, I feel like, to have in any area of life, but definitely when the spotlight is shined on you in so many ways like it has. How are you able to stay so humble and really remember where you came from? Just continue to live who John is and not who John, what would you do, ABC journalist John is.
Oh man, I just think I keep remembering what it was like when I was a kid and before the fame of having my own TV show and being a network correspondent. I'll never forget that. That took its toll on me, and it made me the guy I am, in the sense that I became much more determined to achieve the dream. But I'll never forget how difficult it was and how unfair it was at times, simply because of the color of my skin and the accent in my voice. And frankly, that pissed me off. And I vowed that I would never forget that. So yeah, now I speak English. Any other great correspondent, I have a decent voice and I
Decent voice. Please own your greatness. Please come on, the voice.
Thank you. Thank you. It's just that not willing to forget. And I guess it's the compassion that my family, my mother and father instilled in me to care for others and never think that you're better because of just the luck you've had along the way. And some of this was luck. There are a lot of great reporters out there with great voices who just never met the right person or made the right connection to lead them, like that woman who said, go to Columbia University. So that keeps me humble, realizing, shit, it might not have happened. And I'm also never satisfied and never convinced that I'm all that good. It makes me want to just get better. I don't like, usually my wife will tell you this, I don't like to look at a lot of my own stuff on television because I feel like it could have been better and I could have done this better or that better. And it's ironic because now I'm getting all these awards, these lifetime achievement awards, and I keep telling them I'm too young for this. But the fact is, 40 years have whizzed by at ABC. I've been there 40 years. I've always felt that I can do better. And I remember, again, those disc jockeys from a local radio station who would be doing these remote broadcasts in their little trailers. And I would go knock on their doors and wait for them to come out and tell me how to be on the radio. And they would not give me the time of day.
Wow.
That hurt. Maybe if my mother had not made me so proud and given me so much support, that could have broken me. So that's why I am the guy that I am. That's why I take time for anyone, because it is shit. I am who I am. People don't forget. I'm still the brown skinned Mexican guy. And I still face things like when people assume the worst at an airport, that I don't have the right to fly first class because I probably don't look the part. That's hard to shake. And that keeps you humble.
Totally. Last question before we do our final part of the pod is, how do you practice self-care? And have you always been this way?
Physically or mentally?
All of the above. All of the above.
You know, I'm not perfect. I'm out there trying to exercise whenever I can. I ride bikes often in my neighborhood. I just moved back to Texas from New York, outside of Dallas. And I'm so happy there because it's just more open space. I used to live on the Upper West Side in New York and had a tiny apartment, and it was great. New York's New York, but I miss being able to go out there in horse country and just breathe in the fresh air. That I try to do that physically. I try to watch what I drink and I eat. We love margaritas, and I just got to keep reminding myself. And I'm lucky, unlike, people who have abuse issues, to be able to just have a drink or two and stop.
Thank you for saying that. It makes me feel good that you see that.
Oh, yeah.
So many say to me that all the time, they're like, oh, do you mind if I order a glass of wine? Sorry to talk about this. I'm like, please order one, order three. Like you're not driving and you're not going to have three tomorrow. So that's awesome. You drink normally. I don't drink normally.
Yeah.
Now that's about frequency as well as how I drink in the sense that I don't drink in a normal way. So I hear you there.
I'm lucky enough to be able to say, yeah, that's enough. You know, I don't need any more. Mentally, I express my feelings a lot to my family, and I'm surrounded by a lot of love. I have 3 kids who make me incredibly proud. They're all in the media business. My son is a producer at CNN. My other son has a production company in Miami. And my daughter, who's with me right now, in fact, visiting, I'm in Los Angeles. She works for MTV.
Oh, very cool.
Watching that show, Teen Moms and 16 and Pregnant. She's one of the producers of the show. So they keep me humble and also entertained. And I have a small handful of friends that I'm really close to, as I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
With whom I talk every day, and that keeps my mind clear. And I work. I could be at an age where I could retire. That's the farthest thing from my mind. This kind of work, telling stories, traveling places, interviewing people, getting into people's heads, keeps me alive. It gives me tremendous energy and keeps me young, I think. I don't think I'm ready to ever go play golf somewhere. I just love the travel. I love talking to folks. I love people. I could be by myself at a restaurant having lunch, and I'll be cracking jokes with anyone around me. And I love that. I guess who I am. I have that kind of personality, and that keeps me alive, and that gives me great joy. And the fact that people love the show. When people come up to me and say, you did that segment on that gay Hispanic boy who came out to his parents, and I was watching it with my family. And because of your show, I was able to open up to them, and they were able to accept me when I thought they wouldn't. That kind of thing. It makes me realize, Jesus, the power of the media and the power of the show. It makes me just want to keep doing more and more.
Wow. We are now at the end of our discussion, and we are now moving on to the final part of the episode, the takeaway 10. This is 10 questions that we ask every guest, the same 10 questions. Let's get started. 10 questions, my friend.
All right. I don't like this because I'm a reporter. I ask the questions.
Oh, they're good. What always makes you laugh?
Let's see here. I think what makes me laugh all the time are my pets. Every day, I have 2 dogs and a cat, my wife and I. She's a big animal lover. I never thought I would, but man, they do the craziest things that give me joy and make me laugh.
If you could ask one person one question, who would it be and what would you ask?
Oh my God, let's see here. The Pope. I would want to interview the Pope and ask him about, or her, if we ever had a female Pope, about the issues of abortion and homosexuality. I think we need a strong voice to speak out louder on these issues.
What advice do you have for young people entering the workplace? We already talked about your hope for what they do, but do you have any advice?
Just don't stop believing in yourself. Don't listen to the naysayers. If I had listened to the naysayers, I wouldn't be here today. I can show you 80 letters of rejection that I got from local TV stations in Texas, my home state, who wouldn't give me the time of day. You just got to ignore that.
How should we measure our lives? In years, in moments, in accomplishments, something else?
Moments. I think you live your life day to day. Well, there's no guarantee what's going to happen, even the next hour. I try to live that way, just to find joy in every single thing. Be kind to people because you never know what folks are going through. We all are going through something, like Robin Roberts on Good Morning America says. So in moments, I strongly believe that we have to live for them. I hate when people ask me, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? I don't know. Who knows where we're going to be? I care about right now.
I was at a conference about a month ago, actually, that you've been to, Points of Light, our friends at Points of Light, and Glennon Doyle was there. And the question was, what's next for Glennon? And she said, after this, I'm going to go upstairs and I'm going to put on some gym clothes and I'm going to go to the gym at this hotel before I fly back home.
Nice.
It got a good laugh, but her whole point is that I'm not living on what's to come for me. I'm living on what's next in the moment.
Yes.
If you could, would you really want to live a life that is free from challenges or obstacles?
No, absolutely not. Builds character. That builds character. And by the way, Character is also what you do not when everyone's watching, because that's easy. And that's the motto of What Would You Do? My show, right? It's what we do even when we think no one is watching.
Which three people, past or present, would you invite to a dinner party?
I'd love Peter Jennings to come back. He was my anchor man when I started ABC, and I was in awe of this great journalist who, to me, was like James Bond and who could go on the air and talk forever without a script. So Peter Jennings, I'd love to meet. Barack Obama, because I'm just fascinated by his journey, and Michelle. I did meet him very briefly at one of these very crowded White House events.
Dinner.
Yeah. And I'd like to see Jane Goodall again.
Wow. Oh yeah, that's a nice clip. I love that clip of you guys. How do you define a community, and are you part of one?
The community is where you feel accepted and where you feel the love. And you can make any community, by the way, your community, even if you stand out for any number of reasons. So I think that's it. Being in a place where you can have a diversity of friends, not necessarily people who look just like you or from the same backgrounds. That's boring. I think a community would be, for me, the perfect community would be where everyone at the dinner table is from somewhere else.
Have you ever looked in the mirror and not recognized the person staring back?
No, I think I've always been pretty clear on who that guy in the mirror is. He's not perfect by any means, but he's a work in progress, and I'm proud of what he's done so far.
Last question. What are you grateful for in this moment?
For having got the mother that I did, for Maria, my mother, who just instilled everything that is good in the world. And I feel very lucky to have had her. She passed away many years ago, along with my father, but both of them, they just worked their fingers to the bone to try to provide. And everything I ever did was to try to make her happy and proud. So I think that makes me proud. And my kids. I have 3 kids.
Kids.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John, for this time today. There's one thing that we can take from today's episode. It is the idea of always doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. That holds true for ourselves as well. So please be kind this week and do the right thing, not just for those around you, but for yourself as well. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Small Steps, Big Change podcast. I hope that this episode inspired you to let go of whatever is holding you back and take the first small step. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, follow our YouTube channel, the Small Steps, Big Change podcast, and connect with me on Instagram. Remember, no matter what you are going through, without taking small steps, you are limiting your potential to create big change. So take that first small step today. I promise you that you won't regret it.